Game begin.
All right, welcome to Spike Colony Podcast. I'm here with Mike Flores, who claims he has hilarious things to say.
All right, so I was at a pre-modern meetup a few weeks ago at the brewery, the Finback Brewery in Brooklyn, and my podcast co-host was just like, we need to record every week. And then he was like asking people at the meetup, it's just like, do you have an expectation that Spike Colony records every week? He's like, I just need to record every week. That was like a month ago. I don't even know how long ago that was. There have been no episodes since.
Yeah, there have. So we recorded the Brewer's Bounty episode after that.
Okay, fine. One episode since.
We did all right. We did the 26th, the 7th, the 19th. But it's the holidays and New Year's. Like you were out of town last weekend, right?
I would have recorded remotely. I would have like dialed up. I would have like sent a carrier pigeon with packets of VoIP
just to talk about pre-modern.
Hundreds of miles to talk about pre-modern. Yeah.
I think I needed a break because after 2 episodes, basically just talking about bands and like the meta health, I was just like, I started feeling like agitation that I like didn't like that I didn't want to have, and I was actually like super glad that we took some time to like say like, hey, here's the deal. This is gonna be about like we're gonna do this thing to promote brewing, and then that was just like a great way to like have me like put an actual deck together and just play different decks and kind of
Speaking of you putting a deck together, do you won the online Baja tournament?
Yeah. So I just got off the finals of the Big Apple Highlander versus a friend of the podcast, and there's a new crew in town. I want to
Connecticut town.
The Tolarian PTA, the Fairfield County dads.
You gave me COVID. That's my thing. When people make me laugh and I cough, I say you gave me COVID.
Yeah. Fairfield County, COVID. Connecticut, Tolarian PTA, formed by Matt P.
Brian L.
And Iron Lungs, of course, Chris DeVias. I think Brian L. Yeah, Brian L. should be, because I thought he's a Connecticut. He wasn't tagged. Was he tagged in the
This is poor reporting. You're gonna get kicked out of the journal.
Anyways, he's from Connecticut. We played an intense 3-game battle of Mono White Angel Prison Stacks versus Every Band Card Storm. Took it in 3.
I would just like to point out that Every Band Card Storm was vastly improved by the inclusion of a single snow-covered island, a single snow-covered swamp, and Tainted Pact.
Yeah, Mike has 3 credits on the deck list. I'll take the other 72.
I mean, Instant Speed Demonic Tutor is a pretty good credit, Lanny.
It's kind of like a consultation, which I wonder if we should have just put in the deck for like the true, like the true YOLOs.
I mean, are you like a Team Discovery Channel aficionado? Is this too far back for you?
It probably. I mean, I know that consulting for one-ofs is very much your shit.
That's the 1998 Team Discovery Channel Michael J shit. I mean, it became super. There was no internet back then, right? So whatever I wrote just became in vogue. That became like in vogue, right? Oh, because your chances of getting screwed by it are relatively low.
I think is that a Holy Pecula?
No, I mean let me think. Holy Pecula is more. I said it's like 1997 Michael J.
Okay.
I think this is 1998.
Okay.
I mean, it's like I taught Altran to do it, but Altran actually did it. It's in the report where he.
Well, yeah, and the report says Holy Pecula multiple times.
No, this is a different report.
Okay. All right.
He loses the slot to Mano actually. So, Al like runs through the PTQ, but he's playing Mono Black Suicide. 3-game set rather against Mano, loses slot to Mano. It's a 2-slotter, but Mano was just like, stick around. Both of the guys in the other bracket are assholes. They might both get disqualified.
Amazing.
Al did not win, but he won the next one. But it was Do you know the name Al Train? He was an original member of Team Discovery Channel. He worked with me at the
Well, I
dojo.
got confused because I thought Altran was Lan for a second
No,
because all
well,
of the
why? Because
Ans.
all Asians are the same.
I mean,
We
we definitely have very similar names that all rhyme with each other for what it's
we
worth.
all had. I can't say this. I'll be canceled. But
Okay.
in 1999,
It was fine.
The T-shirt that that myself, Al, Tuna, Land would wear to Magic tournaments would not get you canceled because you could put all kinds of stuff on a T-shirt and not get canceled back then.
Fair enough.
All right, here's a question. This is a serious question. In the New York area, I don't know if this is true everywhere, right? But in the New York area, at the local game store level, right, there's a really strong representation of LGBTQ and especially trans people working in the New York local game stores, right? This is like, there's like a lot of them. And once I went into one of the local game stores that are all affiliated with each other, and one of the women at the counter was wearing a T-shirt that had my favorite word on it, and I made like a comment about how cool this T-shirt was, and she was just like, "You could just buy one from us." Another girl, like one desk over, was just like, "I'm selling them," and I was like, "I could never buy that T-shirt. I would get canceled." I am a cisgender man. You can wear it. You two are not cisgender men. It's a great word, and I would get canceled if I wore it. But it's just not fair. Even within our local gaming community, some people can wear certain T-shirts and some people can't.
I feel like it's not particularly unfair. I feel like in the pantheon of unfair things that can happen to a person,
0% chance I could wear this T-shirt.
That's like not a very unfair thing for you.
100% chance I could appreciate someone else wearing this T-shirt.
I think what's unfair is for somebody assigned male at birth to not be able to wear a dress without going outside and experiencing some form of gender discrimination. But that is neither here nor there. We're here to talk about Magic.
At least what I was talking about was Magic adjacent on two different.
Yeah, it's very Magic adjacent. Right? Like, but regardless,
one was like a T-shirt we actually wore to tournaments.
Big Apple Highlander.
I can't tell you what it said on the T-shirt.
So the first thing that is like coming to mind about Big Apple Highlander is I wonder if you could just ban Yawgmoth's Will and then the format would be perfectly balanced.
Why even bother banning Yawgmoth's Will? I played your deck. I mean, I just zeroed out sometimes. I'd cast my broken card, and the whole point is like there's only one copy of a bunch of stuff, so sometimes it just doesn't line up.
Yeah, but Yawgmoth's Will means that there's like your entire graveyard is also your hand, and your entire deck.
Are you just saying what the card says?
Your entire deck is also your hand. And you also just find it all the time, right? So you have 1,000 copies because you play like 5 tutors. You can brain freeze yourself. You can factor fiction. You can get all your shit duressed or balanced. In game 1 against Brian Lonergan, he balanced me, but I had Will in hand, and he was like balance. And he had 1 land and 1 card in hand. And I was like, okay, I will discard all these.
You know what's great against balance? Artifact mana.
Yeah, I mean that too. But we don't have a lot of persistent artifact mana in this deck. But regardless, like Yawgmoth's Will just strung together like the majority of my wins. Some of them were like obviously created by bargain, but they were created by bargain by way of Will. So like it still ended up being Will that was just the completely broken thing to be doing all the time.
I think you want some level of degeneracy in order to make life interesting.
Yeah.
If we just wanted to make everything boring, we could so you can't ban forever. Okay. So people who are like, oh, we should just, I know you didn't want to talk about bans, but I'm just using this as one example. And then I don't want to talk about bans because I think that pre-modern doesn't need any bans. But if you're saying, we're going to ban Dreadnought, Dreadnought's the best card in pre-modern currently, right? You ban Dreadnought. I mean, it's a slippery slope. Just going to ban the next thing that's good. You want some amount of this makes life interesting, or this creates a boogeyman for us upstanding righteous people to stand against, right? It creates an other for us to create heroes and stories for, right? Everybody loves the stories of how they defeated Dreadnought, right? And when a non-Dreadnought player wins a tournament, or like at least does well or proceeds through rounds, oh man, this is what I did to navigate the situation. You can't have those stories unless there's something a little too good. You want everybody, but the underlying thing here is that they could do something, right? So here's a dragon, but I can fight the dragon. You don't want broken cards that you can't do anything about, right? So the combination of Oath and Land Tax, I think, is the opposite of this, right? You can't really do anything about it other than be even boringer than them. That's all I'm going to say about banned cards.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. And obviously, I think that the part of the charm of Big Apple Highlander is that, like, the games are very, like, they have a lot of different things going on. So on one hand, all of my games revolved around Yawgmoth's Will, but like the way that I got there, is different every time. And then it becomes like, stuff like Orm's Chant or Tormod's Crypt or, other things like that can definitely get in the way.
I forgot. We're now a pro Analogies podcast. I forgot about that. I was about to preamble about saying how much I hate analogies before going into
but you love analogies, and I mean, I also love analogies.
Yeah. But we're also a pro analogy podcast, right? So, Randy Orton is kind of a divisive character in professional wrestling, right? So,
is he the Yawgmoth's Will of wrestling?
Randy Orton has a move called the RKO, which was called the Diamond Cutter when Diamond Dallas Page used it, but it's called the RKO now, and it's the three most devastating letters in sports entertainment. Is the RKO, which are just his initials, right? Randy K. Orton. But the whole thing is like other professional wrestlers consider Randy Orton an amazing worker, right? But it's weird. He's kind of old now, but people think of him as being young because we've seen Randy Orton come through. Like, he was the youngest world champion. His dad was Cowboy Bob Orton, and we saw him like come up through like being a teenager up until becoming, like 30 or 40 something multi-time world champion. But all of Randy's matches end in the RKO pretty much ever since he started using the RKO, and it's a move that like nobody ever kicks out of the RKO. Like, you get RKO'd, you're done, right? So, but the whole music of Randy's career is how he navigates to getting to the RKO, and all the matches are different as a result of that, right? So you're just like, okay, Yawgmoth's Will is the RKO, and actually, in fact, Yawgmoth's Will might be the match because once you're in the Yawgmoth's Will creates a sub game, right? You can still goof around in the Yawgmoth's Will.
Yeah, that's true. No, but, I like it. I like it because just like a great sitcom, it always ends the same way it begins. So
there are.
And like plot armor, it's just like, we still watch stuff even though the protagonist is not going to die.
The WWE puts out videos of like, these are just like the 10 greatest RKOs, right? And like it's like no other finishing move, right? So really, like, no one kicks out of the Stone Cold Stunner as an example, right? Like, Steve Austin was just invincible with the Stone Cold Stunner, but the RKO is so interesting because of like how Randy Orton can position it in matches. And my favorite all-time spot is Seth Rollins went for his finisher, which was called the curb stomp back then before they sanitized it. But he does the curb stomp to Randy Orton, but Randy Orton like elevates his body through the curb stomp to like make Seth Rollins' body be in the air so that he can RKO him. And there's like, but that's not even the number one RKO. Like, Randy Orton has caught people in the air doing like a somersault off the top rope into the RKO. But I think that's Yawgmoth's Will, right? Like, you're like, okay, all the stories like Chapin said, if you cast Yawgmoth's Will, the game ends, right? But like the whole how you get there and what you do when you're in the Yawgmoth's Will sub game could still be interesting.
Yeah, it's moderately. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think, and it's also, there's kind of like a double-edged sword here, though. Is one thing is that the deck is so sort of like, it can do so many different things. So you have all these tutors, you have all this sequencing and all this mana, and you have non-deterministic kills, basically. Like, Yawgmoth's Will is practically deterministic. And you're like, oh yeah, it's kind of fun because like once you cast it, like whatever, but your opponent should just scoop if they, at some point. I need to get better at executing the combo turns like a lot faster and just like having good heuristics for playing faster. And I think that's kind of the weird thing about Big Apple Highlander is like, I'm just not going to play it that often, and as a result I won't get that much practice. But and other people are going to want to play the deck, so they're going to play the deck, and then they're just going to be like, okay, Yawgmoth's will hold priority. Am I playing around, this or this? Do I need, like, what do I need a tutor for? That kind of stuff. So Brian was like a great sport. He was like, the entire time he was just like, this is very interesting, even though he's just like watching me count my mana, right? He's just like, he's like,
according
this is
to you, all I ever do is count at the table.
Well, yeah, but I'm doing it when I'm dead or not dead, right? I'm dead or I win.
It
right?
offends me that you noticed that.
If your opponent goes all in, you're allowed to start talking through your thought process because they no longer have any actions that you can influence. In fact, it's better to talk because you might elicit some tells from them by talking, like whatever. But
pause before because oh my gosh, John told me something super smart. Did I say this thing to you that happened at the Pro Tour where Javier makes a mistake, but Mr. Checklist card plays so fast that to cover up the mistake of his friend?
Oh yeah, you mentioned it.
All right, so
and you mentioned it on podcast too.
No, that's what I'm saying on the podcast. So Javier, the world at the time he wasn't the reigning world champion, but he's now the 2-time and reigning world champion. Makes a horrendous mistake on the table. Simon plays and I can't imagine that Simon doesn't realize that he makes this mistake, right? But Simon plays so fast that no one can even notice that Javier makes this mistake. So I brought this up to John. I'm like, do you think that what do you think is most likely? That Simon was covering up for his friend or that they both made a mistake when Simon is playing this card just to hose this type of card out of his opponent's deck? And John says to me, he's just like, or Simon knew he was going to win, and he wanted Javier to make the same mistake in a future game.
Yep, absolutely.
And I was just like, oh my God, John, how could I have not thought of that one?
Yeah.
Because I was just like giving Simon like the biggest, like not only benefit of the doubt, but like friendship pat on the head. I was like, this is a camera match. And John's just like, no, they're playing for like $20,000.
Yeah.
He wants him to screw up in a situation where it matters.
Yeah.
Oh man, that was a better take. John Finkel, ladies and gentlemen.
I can't say I'm surprised. He figured out what was going on there.
He found the line.
John Finkel of all
like
people.
A second, and he's like, there's no way there. He's just like, Javier is super good. Simon's super good. They didn't both make the same mistake at the same second, right?
Yeah.
And he's just like, it's possible.
And he's not being generous.
Yeah. He's like, it's possible he was covering up for his friend.
Yeah.
Or they're playing for $20,000 into the same situation.
Yeah.
He wants the same pattern to come up again when he can exploit.
No love when the game is on, right? Oh
my God, that's maximum respect. Are you kidding?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
in Slanksky,
but I would love to be outplayed.
That's Slansky's book. Is I'd bust my own grandma if she sat down at the poker table, yeah, no friends in times of war. But yeah, I mean, Big Apple Highlander is a ton of fun, and I'm excited for the decks to continue to develop. And they're just they're just really fun to play. It's just really fun to. It has that cube-like feel where your deck has a theme, but a lot of different things can happen once you draw.
Now that stupid Mano's not on this podcast, I'll tell you something hilarious. So there's no way that this podcast will be published in the next 1 hour and 14 minutes, right?
No.
Okay. Because in 1 hour and 14 minutes, I'm going to Andy's birthday party. So, you know what I got him? Because he said that he would hear it on the
podcast. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, so I got him not all the cards, some of which are very expensive, but I got some of them are nice. Like just cards that were crappy versions in his Big Apple Highlander deck.
Amazing.
Like Ironclaw Orcs and I'm gonna have to say a better card than Ironclaw Orcs, so I'm not gonna sound like a good. Like Red Elemental Blast, stuff like
Flunkies.
Whatever. Goblin Cadet, stuff like that. Whatever.
Yeah, Flame Tongue Cavu, etc., etc.
Whatever the cards that were not.
I'm sure you have some extra gross lightning bolts around. I'm sure everyone does, actually.
No, but I wouldn't give him a gross lightning bolt.
You'd give him a mystical archive, Japanese mystical archive.
No, I gave him good copies, like a FBB REB, like an FBB Ironclaw Works, stuff like that.
Oh, you gave him upgrades.
I
thought you gave him nasties so that he can have 2 copies of the deck. One of them full nasty.
Straight upgrade, like good versions of the cards that were bad versions in his deck.
Okay. Well, happy. What does this have to do with Mano?
Because Mano kept saying no one was interested in Andy's Big Apple Highlander deck.
I feel like nobody besides Andy still is interested. Andy messaged me. He's just
Andy
like,
messaged
I'm
me. He's like,
interested.
I was interested.
Yeah,
in
he
that
messaged
part of
both
the
of
podcast."
us. He put it in the donor chat, which is growing by the day as donations trickle in to increase the Spike Colony Brew bounty. I don't know what it's at, but it's certainly more than it was before. And so far, TC decks won't load because it's being run off, a single person's machine that's just plugged in at all times. But when it does, you'll see that I don't think there's been a Swiss tournament since we launched the bounty. But anyways, I was like, it starts on January 1st. So it started on January 1st. Go win a tournament with your brew. I'm told they're running it.
Could I win the tournament on Tuesday with a brew?
No, it's a meetup.
That doesn't count.
Yeah, the rule is minimum 5 rounds of Swiss with top 8.
What if I just make it, since I often have to run the tournament, what if I just make it minimum 5 Swiss? It's at max, right?
Yeah, minimum 5 Swiss, 17 players. The most you can fit in Perlman's office is 16. So
it's maxed out, right? I'm not even signed up for Tuesday.
It's 16, yeah. It's 16 maxed out with a wait list. Although you can probably still get in. People still get in.
I could walk in. I'm Michael J.
Yeah, figure it out.
I'm one half of the Spike Colony podcast. I mean, people could be famous if I walked in.
Fair enough.
They could be like, "Are you Cam?"
No, you have to win a Swiss tournament. But what's exciting is that starting this year, the Magic Online Society Community Pre-Modern Series leagues now are cut to single elimination top 16s. So those are typically around 80 to 100 players. You play 6 rounds of sort of open play, so you can just play whatever opponents that you can find. But once you make the top 16 cut, you play single elimination with the exact same 75 cards that you qualified with. So that tournament is now going to qualify for the Brewer bounty. So if you win that, no matter where you are in the world, as long as you have an internet connection and a PC to play Magic Online, you can qualify for the Brew bounty. So get in there, get into the community pre-modern series, start brewing, and it's exciting stuff. And I've also thrown my own hat into the ring, working on my exciting and new Beast Attack deck. Which
pronounced Best Attack.
Best Attack, yeah. Best Attack's pretty good. I was calling it like Bant Flash, but you can't use the wedge words in pre-modern. So.
Best Attack.
Best Attack. Best Attack.
So you're just copying my Spice deck.
Yeah, I just took all the nonsense out. Like your Spice deck had just like a bunch of bullshit. It didn't play Swords of Plowshares main. It had Upheavals, which was like the dumbest thing I'd ever seen in my life.
No, Upheaval's super gas. I would have never won a game without Upheaval.
Yeah, but that's because the rest of your deck was trash. So I had to make it all smooth around the edges. I had to make things right.
Upheaval's super gas. That's how you get out of all the problems that you might be in.
I didn't have problems. Also, when your deck is all creature tokens, Upheaval is not like particularly good. And also, you're just a proactive deck. And also, it's 6 mana. Like the other problem with your deck was that it had Rampant Growth, and Wall of Roots is just so much better than Rampant Growth.
How do you expect me to get to Upheaval?
Yeah, Wall of Roots is so much better than Rampant Growth. Like every change I made was like for the better. Also, my intuition packages are amazing. I have Best Attack. Pretty sure you didn't.
I had Best Attack. How could you say that to me?
Oh, well, then you had too much stuff because you had how much Best Attack Hollow Herd did you have?
I had all of it.
Yeah, but how many?
I don't have to look it up. Hold on. You talk and pretend to say smart things while I look up my beautiful Spice Colony tournament.
I think that your Spice deck was unrefined. It didn't have those little tunes to push it over the edge. You didn't have Sunscape Familiar at the one of gassing everything up. Wall of Roots, phenomenal. Rewind is sicker than Upheaval. Just the balance. You actually can't play. When I was like tinkering with the deck, you actually can't play like 1,000.
Okay, I played it in 2 tournaments ever. I won the first one, and then I top 4'd the main Spice tournament. It couldn't have been that bad.
Mental Note. Yeah, no. Mystic Snake. Oh my god. Oh boy, Mystic Snake with 2 more Mystic Snakes. Two Mystic Snakes in the sideboard. I have 4 Mana Leak and 1 miscalculation.
You didn't have Counterspell?
No.
Yeah, because you don't have rampant growth.
Yeah, because Wall of Roots is so much better. Like, what are you going to do if somebody puts a creature in play that attacks? Block them with your rampant growth? What are you going to do? Like, you've talked about it so many times. Like, the best thing that you can do with your blue deck is on turn 3, play a rock and hold up Mana Leak.
Yeah, or you just play a rampant growth for planes and then
get annihilated by your opponent's
block them
spells
with-
because you don't have counterspell up, right?
worship block them with Nimble Mongoose.
Yeah. Anyways, my deck is superior.
Wait,
It doesn't
do you
have
not have-
Werebear.
Do you not have planes?
Of course I have planes. That's what I was telling you. Like, you had plowshares in the sideboard. You have no plowshares, actually. You have just 0
Because
plowshares
Lan wouldn't
anywhere.
let me put plowshares. He said if I put plowshares, he wouldn't play in the tournament.
Yeah, well, you should have put plowshares in it when you took the deck pick. You should have just put plowshares in it when you had planes. You should have been like, looked at your mana base and been like, there's a planes here. I should play swords to plowshares. It's like very, very easy thing to do in pre-modern is to realize your deck produces white mana and then start your deck list with 4x swords to plowshares and then continue with your 56 other cards.
Wait, so what are you saying is better than Upheaval? Rewind?
I mean, everything. Upheaval is just not a card. It's like
Upheaval's
6 mana.
super good. I
It's
upheavaled into Nimble Mongoose many times. Or upheaval into Werebear's even better.
Yeah, I mean those all cost like 1,000 mana. Like, it's just so situational. It's like what kind of game are you playing where your opponent lets you get to like 1,000 mana and then like doesn't have anything to say about an upheaval? Like, what if you're just playing against Mono Blue Tide? You're never getting up to that mana. What if you're playing against Replenish? You're getting Tide comboed. You don't have a null. You don't have a null in your sideboard.
I was literally playing it in a Spice tournament. Nobody was playing those decks.
Yeah, well, those are the things that make the difference. That's why you got to tune. I mean, if you're just playing Upheaval to exploit him, like, what are you saying? So you're saying Upheaval is bad, is what you're saying. Like, I'm telling you that it's not a playable card, and you're like, well, it's a playable card when other people aren't playing playable cards.
Because it makes everybody's permanents go to grip.
Anyways,
I'm just saying what the cards says.
I'm proud of you for putting this blue-green deck together, and I think that mine still needs more work to like fight in more of an open meta. I did get into a bunch of like value grind matchups, like versus like various black green X and Grotog, ironically, and so I got a bunch of favorable matchups that delivered the 6-0. Then I played against Phil in the playoff with a slightly tweaked version of the deck. And Phil, who's been on a tear with Roxer, he literally just can't lose with that deck. He's won like the last, 3 straight playoffs. He's in another playoff with it. He's just been absolutely crushing with his Roxer deck. And he dismatched me in 3 games. Didn't really feel close. Survival of the Fittest and Disruption was pretty solid and other nonsense. But
here's my thought on Upheaval. Whenever people have powerful engines like Survival of the Fittest or Replenish, like those types of accumulation of value, which like typically is like translating into a massive advantage in like physical cardboard, right? Like that's the...
Well, you're both of these examples are really bad, right? Because the survival deck is either Elves, which murders you, or black green, which is going to have the disruption necessary to keep Upheaval off the table. And then you've got Replenish, which has this card Parallax Tide, which it can cast on turn 2 or 3.
I don't think you're going to get Parallax Tided. You have like every kind of disenchant that's cool and counter spells.
Well, Disenchant doesn't interact too favorably with Parallax Tide, and then also,
they have to give you an opportunity to.
You're just gonna get Orm's Chant Replenish. Like, your deck doesn't do anything that Replenished like doesn't already prepare itself for. Like, Upheaval is not an interesting angle that Replenish is like worried about. Like, they're not sleeving up, and then God,
If you have your mana acceleration, you could just do it the turn before they can cast a Parallax Tide, and then they have to rebuild because they play 1 land per turn.
Which is turn 6, by the way. I think it's a pipe dream.
You're just wrong about this,
Mike. I think it's pipe dream. If you want, you can sleeve up the deck. You can work on it, and you can prove me wrong by beating some Replenish players. I don't think that a 6 mana sorcery is going to beat Replenish, because I don't think that. Like,
all their stuff costs 4. You're just straight up just going to beat them. You have mana acceleration.
You keep saying you have mana acceleration. You just have 4 rampant growth, and you still have 6. Like, other decks have Mox Diamond Armageddon, and like that's how you beat Replenish. It's like you're like 3 turns slower than that. And then if you
I'm
also have to
generating value, they're
upheaval with
losing
something.
value.
Again,
Mox Diamond Armageddon is a loss of value. Upheaval is an increase in value.
I'm glad you think so. I think that you're super wrong. And again, you can prove me wrong by playing the deck and winning a bunch with it and upheavaling a bunch of people. I'm extremely doubtful. I don't think that it's viable to be trying to cast like gigantic sorceries. But in the spirit of brewing, I very much encourage it. I mean, I think that decks. I think that one of the big things is that decks have to be able to do a bunch of different things efficiently, and that's kind of like the. What's that?
I would literally bling this deck except for you have my Nibble Mongooses.
Okay, well, I can. Do you have Old Frame Call to Herd yet?
Yeah, I have like 20.
Okay, well, there you go.
When I took the deck pick, I didn't even have 4 Mystic Snakes, but I got them by the tournament.
But anyways, best attack definitely is awesome. I don't think you should be playing 3 upheaval, but I do think that it's. I guess the Werebear is also the ramp, so you can just go rampant growth. Werebear is 5 on 3, 6, 7. So on turn 5, as long as your opponent does literal nothing, you can cast upheaval and then start the game over. At which point both players will discard a hand size, and then you'll go
I think you're missing the fact that you start off. You're basically on turn 3 and they're on turn 0. That's the why it's good.
No, you have to, but then you have to float. Value. Like just turn 2 rampant growth. You have 3 mana. Turn 3.
They're just clunking a 4-mana sorcery speed spell every turn.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Is like you can't ramp and hold up counterspell at the same time. Like, which one are you gonna do?
I don't need to do it until they're at their mana flash point. They can't do anything interesting before turn 4.
I mean, Island Ancient Tomb is on turn 3. Like, you've played Replenish. You just go land.
That's why I know I'm
go land, soul land, attunement. And then from every single turn after that, you have to hold up counterspell because they're just going to flip their attunement and then play Replenish, or they're going to play Parallax Tide. Like,
but you could chip shot them with 1s or get them with 2s off of Mystic Snake. Like, this is like I'm very confident that I'm right.
Okay. I mean, by all means,
very confident.
I mean, and then you have to kind of contend with like the entire rest of the format, which is like generally built to not to get.
That's why you have to cheat. You can't like beat some matchups for real. That's why you have Nimble Mongoose wearing.
Right. I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't hate Nimble Mongoose against Replenish because it can't get Parallax waived. Of course, Parallax Wave can just block it. But again, I don't see anything in this deck. Like, you have 6 counterspells and Ray of Revelation. Like, I don't see anything in this deck like that does anything before turn 7 that Replenish like doesn't see the rest of the time, and Replenish doesn't really seem to struggle to me against that kind of disruption. Like, I think that if you sideboard Meddling Mage, maybe things change. If you maybe sideboard Phyrexian Furnace, stuff change. But
so I think like,
oh man, you don't even have Factor Fiction in this deck. How are you? So okay, I'm over it. I'm happy to see you play the 75.
You know what I would play is Flash of Insights better than Deep Analysis, but we didn't know about that as well yet. Yeah, but it's an intuition deck. That's why you have.
I understand
graveyard stuff instead.
I understand. I put all that stuff in my deck too. I just didn't put it in such aggressive numbers.
No, so Factor Fiction is excellent. Don't get me wrong, especially with Threshold stuff. But you can only have so much air, right? You want me to play like Factor Fiction and Intuition and Flash of Insight / Deep Analysis. You have to have meat.
Yeah, I understand. But that's the other thing is that's how you tune. So part of the issue is that playing a bunch of upheaval like restricts your slots to be doing stuff that is like more oriented towards the early game. Like, I feel like you're just going to lose a lot of games where you draw 2 upheaval in your opening hand. I think you're going to lose a lot of games where you draw upheaval and you don't have ramp. I think you're going to lose a lot of games where you're identifying the problem like is air, and I agree with you, and I think that a solution to that problem is to just like tweak the numbers to a point where you have my deck, which has Swords of Plowshares, and which has.
First of all, I should have Swords of Plowshares if I'm going to play this.
Yeah, but where would you put the Swords of Plowshares? Like, just looking at your deck list right now, where would you put it?
I would probably cut some best attacks. I'll be honest with you.
So you would just play it in the sideboard. Least
impressive portion of.
So you'd only play Plowshares in the sideboard.
I don't know. Probably. I don't know. I haven't picked the deck up in 6 months, 10 months. The thing that I'm thinking is, like, my whole game plan against against real aggro decks like goblins is just to gimmick them, right? So like, I don't know, how do you beat elves? Like you need cards like Upheaval in order to beat decks that create cardboard advantage.
I think it's
And
very unlikely that that Upheaval is the secret to defeating elves.
like you need to not lose, right? Like there's plan A, live another minute, see what happens in the next minute. And then plan B is you have to, not plan B, sorry, like moment B or whatever is you have to do something once you're alive for that next minute. But you can't contend with elves on a fair axis. Like no deck beats elves because they played fair.
Yeah, I mean that's fine. I think that in general blue-green decks are going to struggle with elves overall, and then even blue-green-white decks are going to struggle against elves. And goblins is like close but similar, but at least you can conceivably like have Hydroblast in your sideboard.
But there's a lot of games I think that with this kind of deck that you might be discounting, which is like my only game plan was to use my counter spells to stay alive, and then I upheaval into a situation where you're dead. Like you're literally on turn 1 and I have like lethal bit damage in play.
I mean, I could live with 1 upheaval, but 3 just seems crazy to me.
But you
like
can't intuition for it if there's
one. Then you're spending 9 mana to like activate your upheaval.
No,
like,
you're spending 6 mana. You cast them on different turns.
I'm familiar with the idea of casting out on different turns. You're still investing 9 mana. Like your opponent is doing things all of the time. Like one of the things I actually said in my video was just like the goal of this deck is to spend this mana every turn. So one of the weaknesses of your deck is that you don't have a lot of instant speed stuff to be doing. If your opponent passes without playing a spell that you want to counter, right? So you have 8 counter spells, and you have
I would have Flash of Insight.
You have 3 intuition, so you're very unlikely to like be in. That's why I think having Factor Fiction is so important, and it's important over Deep Analysis, because the other thing is front sighting Deep Analysis is going to be a liability, because your deck isn't going to like. Your opponents aren't going to let you just ramp to 6 mana, frontside Deep Analysis, hold up counterspell.
Lanny, what I'm saying, I'm just going to have Flash of Insight instead of Deep Analysis. So that cures that a little bit.
But you still have to cut in like quite a bit. Like those are generally my misgivings. Like my deck is AK, my deck has my deck is Factor Fiction. It has Wall of Roots, which enables all of that a lot better. It has Sunscape, which enables that a lot better. Like, don't get me wrong, our decks have a lot of similarities, but like, I feel like my deck is a little bit more realistic about the kinds of things that are fake. And your deck is like very committed to what I think is like a very common Michael J thing, is just kind of like being really interested in what happens at the end point, and like not getting there. Some of the time is just kind of like, okay, well, maybe that's like the core weakness of your deck. But like,
I wouldn't have Mental Note anymore. I remember hating Mental Note when I was playing.
Mental Note is definitely extremely suspect, because
I thought the deck was more of a threshold deck than it ended up being.
Yeah, but those are all things that, and that's the other thing is like, I think that just like Upheaval, like Decree of Justice is like a totally fine endpoint, and it fits into the plan like the entire rest of the time. Now, I don't love Decree of Justice necessarily, but I did a few testing matches, and I literally got to a point where I just like had intuition for everything, cast all my stuff, had 1,000 lands in play, and like my opponent was still grinding, and I like just didn't have this thing to like do something gigantic that would close the door. So like Decree is definitely playing the role of Upheaval, but what's nice is that it's multimodal, so you can play it at instant speed most of the time, and then every now and then, if you want to have like a big board breaking effect, like just putting 2 or 3 angels on play is like probably enough.
So like, let's say your opponent got like a little bit better than you for like the first few turns, or maybe you missed a land drop, they advanced their game position, blah blah blah, right? They were just a little bit better than you. You can just cast a crappy Upheaval to make the game even again, and then you start the game faster than them, and they probably have to discard more cards than you, right? That's a pretty good use of Upheaval.
I mean, it's I think that's optimistic, because the other point is that, in this world, you still like, you don't have any mana acceleration that gains value, right? So you don't have anything like City of Traders. In the Upheaval scenario, like, no, Mox Diamond would be even worse. But like the other thing is like 6 mana, like, the difference between Upheaval and Armageddon is just kind of like, oh, okay, both of those like are 1 card. But Upheaval is actually 3 more cards, right? Because you need 2 extra mana sources and the Upheaval. And like, that like you're playing a game, you're like, okay, we're getting a little bit behind. It's like, well, yeah, we're getting behind because in our mix of whatever 14 cards, 6 of them are mana sources and 1 is upheaval. It's like, what's the rest? It's like the rest is just,
so upheaval cures
counterspell.
It cures that for you, right? So
right, but I think
like
I think it's optimistic against those types of decks to assume that if you start on the back foot, your life total is under pressure. Like, but your opponent's playing some generic beatdown deck. Even if you go upheaval on turn 7, even if you go upheaval, play a land nimble, like on turn 6 or 7, you play upheaval nimble, like play a land nimble mongoose. You're starting the game over, and you're still playing a deck that only scales linearly, right? You like the whole point of like. Whatever Anthem beatdown, Tribal beatdown, whatever kind of synergistic like creature forward deck, like those decks like are designed to be using like their time very efficiently. Like if you're just starting them with 7 cards in hand, like whatever, and you have a lower life total, like what makes you think that a 3/3 like that having a 3/3 on the play is going to change in the reset game where they have their entire life total and you have whatever you've lost?
So I mean, it's just in the range, right? Like, so it doesn't mean that I win the game, but it's not designed to win the game. It's designed to not lose the game, because those kind of games are probably going to result in a second upheaval being cast where I do have a tremendous advantage. So the thing is, like, what will end up happening in this situation is my opponent's going to now be in a situation where they're discarding multiple relevant things, and I'm generating card advantage.
I mean, what if they just keep 3 lands and 4 spells because their deck is like lean and is like, it's like.
I mean, if it depends. Obviously, depends what kind of deck they are. But if I have a Werebear or a Nimble Mongoose and they keep 3 lands and 4 spells, I'm going to win the game because I'm going to keep 3 counter spells. So like I'm going to tempo them the next 3 turns.
I mean, your Werebear and Nimble Mongoose scenario assumes that you cast a 9 mana upheaval, and you said you were behind. Like I'm saying, if you're behind, you're just going to stay behind. Like I don't think upheaval is going to table flip. It's just going to restart the game, and your opponent can just be like, okay, like Mog Fanatic, Pile Driver, Ringleader, or Mog Fanatic, Pile Driver, Ringleader.
I would not advocate this being a very good strategy against Mog Fanatic.
Okay, well then they're going to go. Yeah. Well, you mentioned Elves, right? So what are they going to do? They're like, okay, I guess I pick up all my stuff. Okay, I guess I discard all my stuff. And I'll go Forest, Llanowar, Elves. Like you start. You have Nimble Mongoose. I go Forest, Llanowar, Elves, and then you're just like
scenario. But I can play for a situation, but you have to tempo them in such a way that you just don't straight up lose.
Right, but here's the thing about tempo is that a down payment of 6 is extremely difficult to overcome. Like I would actually be like weirdly more of a believer if you could somehow like have Mox Diamond in the mix, but like just playing,
you will just any excuse to get Mox Diamond.
No, I mean I think that it's horrible here. But if you're an upheaval, like if upheaval is part of your plan, like you need to have something. Like if you don't want to play Mox Diamond, you could conceivably play Exploration in a deck like this, where you just like don't play Rampant Growth and Werebear, and instead you
mean like Brian G's deck that I didn't even know was Phil's
just
deck.
Nothing. Like you just need to do like something that makes it more, because Forest 3/3 is not like that far above rate for like a like pre-modern reset game where again you're at a lower life total and your opponent's just gonna like, okay, well let's just play Magic. We're still playing the same game.
Plan 1, this would not be my plan 1 in any matchup, right? I'm just saying in the range, sometimes this is a thing that you can do to not lose, and if I get another turn that I haven't lost, something might happen that's good for me. But if I lose, that's not possible.
Yeah, I mean, right? I don't think that's a 3 slaughter. I think that's like a 1 slaughter.
I think that maybe I think that you have to build your deck in a way that you can exploit this realistically, or there's no point in doing it. But B, I hate using B because I've been thinking about this so much about Plan B versus Plan 27. But the thing is, like, there's not enough space to do the ultimate ace every single time if you're playing an intuition deck. Upheaval does like a B- version of the ace in like 4 different scenarios, and it's actually multiple A+ versions, right? But it really can just B- you out of a not loss, and then
I mean my thesis is just that the format as it exists like puts too much pressure on decks to like be doing things within the first 5 turns and like be playing a game where like you're able to like trade resources, you're able to like stop your opponent while still getting ahead, and you're playing a bunch of super airy cards like a werebear is not like a great investment of turn 2. Neither is rampant growth. Mental note doesn't sit that well on the curve.
Mental note's not very good. So that,
Mystic Snake is even just like,
I will tell you, Mystic Snake is clearly great against replenish. Like if you're gonna sit there and be like, I didn't do anything, Mystic Snake's freaking fantastic. Are you honestly telling me if you has a Mystic Snake, every single deck that could cast one, you wouldn't want that card against replenish?
I mean,
it is the perfect answer to
I would rather like, because it costs 4 mana, it means that you're putting yourself out of like double counterspell range. Like I would rather have something like Rewind, and if not Rewind, like I would rather have something like Dismiss, because I think a card is worth more than a 2/2.
0% chance my Upheaval deck would rather have Rewind than Mystic Snake. Right?
What about Upheaval makes Rewind worse?
Well, the thing that it's not that, like, you Upheaval and get the Mystic Snake back a lot of the time, so that like
that 5 turns after your Upheaval you can cast Mystic Snake again.
This exact scenario has come up for me multiple times, and
but you're not being put under pressure. Like, and don't get me wrong, like again, I have to remind everyone that like my deck wasn't put under like particular pressure. Like I didn't have to play against goblins, I didn't have to play against whatever. But anyways, this is too much talk on deck lists that people can't see, and yours, which you've played,
2 times,
10 matches total on. Like, I don't really.
I won the first.
I don't think it's really like too like.
And it was a real pre-modern tournament, not a Spice tournament.
I mean, you played the Spice tournament, and then you played. I see your tweet. It says mono blue prison, blue red deck wins, and fair food chain. Is that the real tournament? Which one's the real tournament?
The one with the deck pick was the real tournament. And then I played
right, but the real tournament is also against Spice decks.
Oh, okay. I don't know.
Yeah, you haven't played it in real pre-modern. Like that's the other thing. Is like I don't understand. Like I just don't really think you have a ton of credibility here. Aside from you're just kind of like, well, Upheaval's kind of sick. And like, don't get me wrong. Like there are interesting things about like playing. Like I think a deck that contains Upheaval, is interesting. But I think like. I think that one of the huge drawbacks of the card, aside like the other thing is like you're kind of talking about all these angles, and you're right, like they're there, but you really have to drill down into okay, like how many times am I going to have this much mana in play? Against a format like what are you going to do up against Mono Blue Tide, right? You're just like never going to be able to stop Mono Blue Tide from doing this thing.
Just 2 things I want to say. A, if I were going to play a tournament like LobsterCon, right? If I was like, I'm going to play like a 9-round Swiss, a 7-round Swiss, and it was the most important tournament of the year for me, I probably wouldn't pick this deck. Okay, like that's point A. But B, where a deck like this becomes exciting for me, I brought it up in light of the Brewer's Bounty, but B, like. I was thinking about doing the whatever draft thing that I commentated on. And the reason that I thought it was interesting was because there's all these opportunities to play good decks where archetypes are undefined. I'm like, oh, if I got Bant, what's it called? I would just slot this here and I bet I could get wins, right? But, like this deck matches up extremely well against a red aggro deck in a 3-game set, right? And like it's really hard for a red aggro deck to beat Nimble Mongoose, Rampant Growth, Worship. Like that's very hard.
Well, now they all play a Green Splash for Naturalize, so.
Well, not all of them, but I would, because I will have drafted both the red deck, wins deck, and the green.
Right, but you're still talking about not pre-modern. Like the point is, do you think that you can play a competitive deck with Upheaval in it?
Yes.
Then do it. That's all I have to say. Then do it and build it better than this. Like we both agree that the deck doesn't look like this. So that's like a good start. And then I would also say like figure out what the deck looks like and go ahead and play it.
If my assignment were I have to play a competitive deck with Upheaval in it, I would
No, your assignment isn't your assignment is you're playing you have an idea, which is just like I think that there's like this. I mean, this is actually kind of the feedback that I want to give to most people who are just like, I have this brew. Like, I think that like the biggest mistake to make is to start your brew and just be like, I want to play this card, and I'm going to do everything to make this card advantageous. Like in the process of making Upheaval a playable card, you might be stuffing your deck with so many unplayable cards that the times that you do get Upheaval, maybe it's an A+, but the times that you don't get to Upheaval because you didn't get to 6 mana, because your opponent killed you, et cetera, or you just drew too many, like those are going to be much more often. And that's how brews get kind of killed off. Like it always starts with the dream. It's like, okay, I want to get, I want to have 2 squeeze in a forbidden hand. And then you start building that deck and you're just like, it is super, super hard to ever get 2 squeeze in a forbidden hand. And then there's like too much excitement. Hand? There's like, oh, I also need like Arcane Lab, and this is also like a zombie infestation.
Here's the thing. If we're going to say, like, I'm going to play Cutthroat whatever the equivalent of Cutthroat Pre-Modern is, okay? Like, if I'm going to play that, I just got done saying I wouldn't pick this deck.
Right, but that's my point, is would you play, but that's
Pre-Modern is a universe where there are other conditions that are put on. You just got finished playing a Pre-Modern variant where
I'm telling you that I don't want to talk about that. I'm telling you that the whole purpose of the Brewer's Bounty is like you have to go and you have to win a tournament. And other people are there and they're going to want to win a tournament. So they're going to play Dreadnought, they're going to play Goblins, they're going to play Replenish, they're going to play Elves. Hopefully not, but they're still going to do it, right?
Why do you hate Elves? Elves is excellent.
Because people play Burn and Goblins and Replenish. Like Burn, Goblins, and Replenish in any world, in any room,
even though people play
in any room with 300 people in it, like I don't know, 50 and a bunch that are in the 3-0 bracket should be playing Burn, Goblins, and Replenish. And so you want to play Elves into that winner's metagame. Like I don't think that you should. Like I think that you can play Elves if you want to have a good time and you like Elves and you're good at playing Elves. But
Elves had an average finish of 75%. At LobsterCon.
Yeah, but that's not like I'm happy for Elves getting 75%, but like at the end of the day, this is why I'm telling you. It's like how deep did the best Elves player get into the tournament? How close to the top it was?
One match out of top 8.
Yeah, but that's
two more
the match that counts. And guess what that match was against? A horrible matchup. Like what kind of Mike, you're not the kind of person, I assume that you're not the kind of person that puts yourselves in a position where the tournament gets progressively harder as you go along. Like that's the thing. I am that
kind of person.
Okay,
the next I choose crush round 3.
Anyways, I think that Nick Mayo made a good calculated decision based around the presence of goblins, but because goblins was like super much lower in the metagame. It's been continually low in the metagame recently. So much so that it's, if I had time, I'd be playing it more to figure out if it's really just struggling as a deck. Like maybe there's just something that's...
I mean, I played goblins in a 1K this year. I played goblins in...
Well, I'm talking about in recent history, right?
I think, but all the large Swiss data says goblins is overrated.
Yeah, but that's why I think it's interesting, because like goblins has favorable. One of the big things that goblins has favorable matchups into Dreadnought, and then
you
goblins,
beat it.
Goblins is, yeah, but it didn't feel good. Like I would have taken almost any other pairing in the top 8 besides maybe. But
Magic is binary. Like doesn't have to feel good or not. Like I want a long PPQ once where I said I had bad matchups like most of the rounds, but I won.
But the point is, like, I'm just saying, like, I found the 45% or whatever it might be. Like, it might be 40%, right? Like, I ended up in the scenario. My opponent drew too thin. What are these things? Whatever happened, like, I wasn't in a scenario where I was like winning. Because my deck was more powerful, I was winning because the cards got dealt my way. And granted, Dreadnought puts yourself in a position where the cards do get dealt your way. And I think Elves is at least interesting in this discussion because Elves does have incredible draws that are extremely hard for other decks to contend with. And Goblins sort of doesn't have that. And so that's a huge point in Elves' favor. But I do think that if the metagame tightens around specific strategies like Replenish, like Goblins, and like Burn, then Elves, is in a really difficult spot. Because like I think that, for instance, if you want to say I want to play an explosive deck that's difficult to exploit, that beats a lot of random stuff and plays well into tier 1, regardless of how I feel about Replenish, I think that you should play Replenish, right? Or I think that you should play something like Red Green Oath, because both of these decks. And Burn's a great example too. Both of these decks. I would just
play Burn if those
are these are all decks that beat that have like a really, really excellent matchup spread into tier 2. So Elves has an excellent matchup spread into tier 2, and I think it just has a very bad matchup spread into tier 1. And that's not me saying that Elves should be like tier 3. I think the joke was like Metelsky put it on tier 3 in the thing he posted on Twitter, and then people blew up. But
well, it's clearly not tier 3.
Yeah, of course. But I mean, whatever. Tier 3 is like, you could just put like, tier 3 is just like unplayable. Like tier 2 is like, you wouldn't advocate for playing tier 2 in a lot of scenarios unless you had a read. But that's the other difficult thing is like, I think the only real read that would go Elves' way is if your opponents are playing a lot of Dreadnought. Like it's just like tons and tons of like if you're just like, this is going to be like mostly Dreadnought, and like, I don't know what other deck does Elves like absolutely shit on.
Maybe I'll just play Mengu Elves this week. Actually, I'm not even qualified.
Mike, answer the question. What are you targeting with Elves?
I think Elves is a generically good deck.
Right, but what are you targeting? Because you want to win. Because how to win a PTQ is top 1 is the only one. There's only one invite.
No, so like if I just this is going to sound weird, right? Because we have a metagame that we can encapsulate. But I think like if you don't have a very good idea of what the metagame is, Elves becomes an increasingly good choice.
Is it a better choice than Burn or Replenish?
For me, it is not a better choice than Burn, right?
Is it a better choice than Replenish?
On average, yes. I think
because Elves can lose to the Rock. You know what deck can never lose to the Rock if we're talking about mid range? Like if we're talking about tier 2 or like an open field.
We use a lot of never, but the Rock has beaten Replenish in the past. So I would say
right, but which deck do you want to have if you want to win the tournament? And you're saying
of course I would rather be Replenish than the Rock, right?
Right. So what's in a wide field?
Power
like
level outlier.
I mean, what's in a wild field? Like the Rock, Land Still, Black White Control.
So like
Terrageddon. Elves is probably pretty good against Terrageddon.
Yeah, but it's also pretty bad against Oath, right? So like,
well, that's the tier 1. Yeah, I'm talking about Terrageddon, not Terra.
Okay, so let me just say this for a second. So there are communities that are less cutthroat than us, right? Which is most of them. So like people are just gonna show up and play the things that they feel like playing, right? Like, and if like the more people are just playing like some wild version of pre-modern, the better Elves looks. But maybe that's what you're saying. Like it's not good.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Right.
You start 6-0, and then your next opponent is playing Replenish, and then you feel sick to your stomach.
But like Replenish is like very badly bulleted by just there's like a lot of decks in like tier 1 and tier 2 just like put a hole in the side of them.
Name them.
I don't know. Who did I lose to? Flint. I lost to Flint Espel.
Okay, name them in 2025, please.
I would rather be.
I can give you the answer.
I would rather be Burn than Replenish.
Blue, white, flippy. No, I'm not talking about Burn or Replenish. We're talking about Elves or Replenish. I'm saying both Replenish and Burn are more important than Elves. Oh, you want the Burn side?
Yeah, like I would rather be Burn than Replenish.
Okay, so your opponent's playing Burn. Would you rather play Replenish or Elves?
Replenish. By a mile.
I'm waving my hands wildly here, right? So why are you playing Elves? That's my point. Like, and the whole point that this started.
What if so I was gonna say, what if your metagame is all land still?
I would play Red Green Oath.
I'm just saying, would you rather be Replenish or Elves if your world is all land still?
I would probably still be Replenish.
Really?
Yeah, because you just go Orm's Chant Tide combo, like Orm's Chant Tide combo, Orm's Chant Replenish, or just cast Factor Fiction.
Annoying. It's
I mean, you can still get them on game 1. I've generally like I obviously have a slight deviation because either my Replenish lists are different, but I've always felt good against blue white land still. Like
I've never lost to blue white land still with Replenish either. But I'm saying I would rather be Elves.
Okay, so but that's the thing is like what like okay, so you've nailed down the metagame. So if you go in and the room is 50% land still, then you'd rather be playing Elves than Replenish. But the rest of the time,
the first question I would ask is, are the land still that guy who beat all of us at Bearded? Because if it's not,
then you would be playing Burn.
50% land still.
Okay, and we've arrived. A
quick day at the office.
This is like actually a really excellent thought exercise for when we talk about tier 1 and tier 2. Because I've talked a bit about how much I dislike Replenish, and the big reason I dislike Replenish is because I think that Mono Blue Dreadnought is the deck, and I think Replenish struggles terrifically with Mono Blue Dreadnought. Now, Rich Shea doesn't
to contend with Mono Blue Dread.
What's that?
So the question I said, you could just build Replenish to contend with Mono Blue Dread.
Right, but Replenish already leans on its sideboard pretty heavily to contend with random other stuff. It's not like those sideboard slots are free, right? So like, for instance, replenish has 2 to 4 Sabo's web somewhere in the universe, right? And each one gives you like plus 5% against Pawn's Oath, right? So if you start cutting them because you want to play meddling mage or a null or whatever nonsense, then your stock against mono blue Dreadnought.
You really need the Orm's Chance, the abayances against Dreadnought, because those are value generating.
Yeah, but those are no longer powerful against Tide. So now the Dreadnought player sideboards into Tide. You play Tide. They just play Tide, and you go Orm's Chant, and it's like, okay, well, you better kill them because the next you're either going to lose all your lands and then get stifled anyways, or you're on the Dreadnought player's upkeep. You're going to lose all your lands anyways. So
and you're just presupposing all Dreadnought players are in Araska.
There's no reason in the current metagame to not be all Araska. Once it's all Araska, then there can be like an interesting mix of some people playing blue-white and like whatever. But right now, in this current moment, if you're playing Dreadnought, you should be playing Raska. You should play exact 75, or you can play Rich's 75 with the one brain freeze.
I don't like saying should. But I'm saying that you're just saying there's no reason to not be Raska.
Yeah, there's no reason not to. I mean,
when you say should presupposes a lot of things.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. I do think that in reality, people are going to play. People are going to like a twist on the deck, and they're gonna next level before they get the chance next level. And sure, if you're in that world and you're a replenish player, you're generally going to be like maybe a little bit more comfortable because instead of 100% of the mono blue Dreadnought players you're facing have Tide in the sideboard, 60% do. And then all of a sudden, the 40% that don't have Tide are like a great matchup. And then you're just kind of like, okay, I can just play Orm's Chant Abeyance, and then
that's what I'm saying. Like, a lot of stuff depends. Right?
That's totally fine. But
I also don't think Raska is an objectively better deck than blue white. Right? It is. There are reasons you would play one, and there are reasons you'd play another.
Right. And I think given the current metagame, mono blue has a much stronger angle on the current metagame than blue white until mono blue occupies. It's the same thing as I was saying with like burn with Lava Dart. Like if burn is going to be 10%, then don't play Lava Dart. If burn is going to be 20%, then you probably have to play Lava Dart. And then ironically, you cannibalize your own win rate because your Lava Dart deck does worse against decks where you're short 3 sideboard cards. And then everybody's win rate lowers equally, and then that's how equilibrium works. Like if mono blue Dreadnought rises, and then blue white Dreadnought ends up mixing in because conceivably it has a better matchup against mono blue Dreadnought. It might not. It might be mono blue can actually adapt to beat blue white, but we haven't seen that yet. But let's say in the fact of the matter was that blue white beats mono blue and holds slightly less win rate against the field. That's another form of equilibrium, right? So then mono blue gets held back, blue white comes in. Maybe replenish is slightly better against blue white Dreadnought. I don't think that it is. Your testing experience says that it isn't, but other people seem to think whatever. But
has other incentives other than meddling mage, right? Right, like the ability.
Yeah, I mean, it's like plowshares.
Armageddon is a big game.
Yeah, but Armageddon and Parallax Tide are functionally identical here.
I mean, Armageddon's less work.
It's slightly less work. I don't think
it's less work and more payoff, actually.
No, what do you mean? One-sided is not a better payoff?
No, but like generally when you're like doing the Armageddon game, you have remainder versus when you're in the Tide game, you're like comboing and you're like the payoff is that you continue to play the game at value versus right. Like, so how long did it take Selden after he Tide comboed somebody twice to win the game? Right. Like the Armageddon games just end. You just cast them and then they're dead 2 turns later.
I mean, that's not, I don't think that's necessarily true. Like they can still recover from Armageddon in the same way that they recover from Tide. Like, and then you're also talking like the other thing is, you don't have any way to like make Armageddon better besides like playing a land and then also having Gush. But like if you're adding Gush to Armageddon, that's the same thing as adding Stifler.
The way that you make Armageddon better is by ending the game. Like the Armageddon is fundamentally a disadvantageous card because it's symmetrical, right? So the reason that it's good is because the game ends. It ends before they can get the
right, but you still need the thing. You still need the thing, and if you're much happier to have all your lands to win the game, especially if one of them is Mishra's Factory.
Yes, obviously, one of them is asymmetrical, one of them is symmetrical. It takes more
right, but you keep saying end the game, and I'm telling you that you have to explain to me how the game ends.
It ends because you clock them with the 12-12 twice.
Right, but then then you're saying that it's easy enough to like have Armageddon, your opponent's not sandbagging removal, and with your 0 lands, you're going to play land after Armageddon, and then you're going to have the interaction to go Dreadnought Plowshares, and then you're still talking about, you know, what ends up being a 3-card combo, which is Armageddon, Stifle, Dreadnought, versus a 3-card combo, which would be Parallax Tide, Stifle, and Mishra's Factory or Dreadnought if you get to that point. Like, I don't think that Armageddon is more game ending than Parallax Tide, bottom line.
I think that your win rate after successfully executing the Parallax Tide combo is probably higher than somebody's win rate after executing Armageddon in blue-white. I actually would say that the Parallax Tide combo was more likely to win the game than Armageddon is. I think they're both likely to win the game, but Parallax Tide is much more likely to win the game than Armageddon. However, there are other incentives, but those incentives are based on how the games play out, not based on whatever math equation that
I mean, wins above replacement is like kind of the most important thing for me when we're discussing this, and like regardless, all I'm saying is that like we're in a universe right now where we're contemplating a mixed metagame where there would be a mix of mono blue and blue white, and
other combinations, like,
and we're not there yet. And then also, you know, even then your replenish deck is going to be like pretty scared of getting that Armageddon, like less scared than Parallax Tide. And there are some decks that are more scared of Armageddon because maybe their entire plan is hedged around Pyroblast or Annul because they're so scared of mono blue, and then the Pyroblast and Null decks get Armageddon.
That's a huge advantage to the Armageddon deck.
Yeah. So those are all interesting things to consider, and like I said, we'll see how this shakes out. But anyways, the arching point, the first point I was making was like, one, if you're brewing to attack this metagame that exists, and you want to have an angle on it. And I'm not saying that best attack is the antidote, but I'm saying that upheaval does not answer any questions that are being asked by the metagame. It's possible that Wall of Roots also does not, but I think that Wall of Roots and main deck Swords of Plowshares is a lot closer than upheaval.
Well, those are higher quality cards than Mental Note.
Yeah, but that's exactly my point. They're higher quality cards in upheaval in the only context that mattered. But the other thing that in this discussion that I thought was really interesting to uncover was basically this overarching thing, which is like, what is like, what, like, why do I say X deck is tier 1? Is because like when we have this conversation and you say like, let's play this deck, let's play this deck, let's play this deck, is like, what are the incentives for playing this deck? Like when I say tier 1, it's just like the incentives are extremely high, right? So every tier 1 deck, the table stakes is that pre-modern is a super wide format and you have to defeat nonsense. And that is like a thing that holds back like a lot of tier 2 decks, right? So like one thing that's hilarious, like, you know, we forgot to mention Stasis when we were talking about Elves, right? But like Stasis is like a very exciting and good deck. It's a great deck against Replenish.
It's a very bad deck.
You can tech it against Mono Blue Dreadnought, and you know, it's a good deck against Red Green Oath, and maybe you have enough red hate in the sideboard.
I would say it is the best deck against Red Green Oath.
Yeah, I mean, as I've called it multiple times for Red Green Oath and seen Red Green Oath win multiple times, I absolutely agree.
Still think it's the best deck. It's also a great deck against Tide Control. It's a great deck against Replenish.
Yeah, it's a superb. Yeah, so
it is a very bad deck against Red. It is a very, very bad deck against Elves.
Yeah, exactly. And also there's sort of like the underlying sort of weird inconsistency with the deck. But Stasis is like a great example of just like, okay, well, why is it not in the tier 1 conversation? It beats a bunch of tier 1 decks, right? Like it beats more tier 1 decks than, you know, I don't know, Burn does or whatever. So, and the reason why it's not in the conversation is because like, okay, well, I would never take Stasis to a tournament because I might run into Elves. I might run into like, you know, a red deck, like red decks are playing more Red Blast these days because of Dreadnought, right? So it's like, I'm getting hit by that. I'm getting hit by more Annuls. Like I'm getting hit by just being a slightly weaker deck. Like Gush is my only card advantage engine. Like I'm relying on this thing. Sometimes my opponent can wiggle out of the lock. Sometimes my Forsaken City gets wastelanded, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So like, Stasis becomes, you know, a tier 2 deck as a result of that because it's like actually kind of good in like an Arrow tier 1 meta. But if, you know, you have to succeed in both stages of the tournament. You have to succeed beating random decks, and you also have to succeed against tier 1. And then also you're not a slam dunk because, like I said, goblins are burn. you can be really good against them if you play 4 chill, 4 blast or whatever, and you can also be really bad against them. But yeah, regardless, I think that this has kind of helped enlighten that decision. It's like, and it's a big reason why the discussion around Elves is like, I'm so adamant. I'm just like, look, Elves is not a weak deck. Nobody thinks that Elves is a weak deck. Like when I say it's unplayable, I say it in the same way that it's like, I say Replenish is unplayable. I say Replenish is unplayable because I would never want to play against Dreadnought anymore with Replenish. And my goal when I play Magic is to win every single tournament I play. And I would rather
how to win a PTQ.
Yeah, exactly. My goal is first place. Like it's anything less than first is short of the goal. And it's okay to not get first place, but the objective is first place. And I cannot visualize a tournament that I get first place playing Elves. I have a hard time visualizing a tournament where I get first place to Replenish. Like the reason why I think
Elves?
What's that?
Have you ever played Elves?
Yeah, I played Elves. I played Elves here and there. Like I played it a lot like last year, like or in 2023. Played it in a few leagues, played it in some test games.
So the one thing I would say is, I think at this point, I mean, I'm just talking about, I'm mostly playing meetups, right? Like playing LobsterCon is a different question, but mostly playing meetups. Meetups and $1,000 tournaments are two different animals to me, and then LobsterCon's a different animal again.
Yeah. For the record, I don't play to win the meetup. Like the meetup, I just play Grow Talk.
But my objective in play the meetup is to have an interesting experience with my friends.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So like, I was actually thinking about this morning about like how seriously I used to take meetups.
Yeah, you talked about it in the last podcast.
How salty I would get when I wouldn't win.
Yeah, you've talked about this in the last podcast.
Yeah, so like literally these are just my friends and I just want to have a good time. And so so I'm like, I would just play whatever because I'm just there to eat dumplings or whatever and hang out afterwards.
Yeah, that's totally a great time to play Elves. And it's also a great time to play like your Upheaval deck and just like put yourself in some game states that like that teach you something about a deck. Like part of the problem is like, okay, if you take Burn to the meetup, like what are you going to learn about Burn? Are you going to learn that, you need more, like you need like one different sideboard card?
The last time I played Burn, I played the red-green version, which I had never played before, Aaron's version.
Right, but I
had a great time.
That's clearly,
really
but I mean, that's clearly a better counterexample if you're using the time for science. But you like learn a lot. It's another important part of the brew process. Like when you're testing a new deck, and green, red, burn is included here. Like when you're testing a new deck, you can just put your deck through situations, and you can be playing against whatever people are bringing to the meetup. You can play whatever people are playing in the leagues and Magic Online, and you can be like, bottom line, does my deck function? And like, does my deck have random weaknesses? So an example of this is I played against, Sam has a deck on his Mox field called 5C Guile, and it is a domain control deck that has 4 copies of Miri's Guile and 11 fetch lands and 4 Gaia's Blessing, or 3 Gaia's Blessing.
How many Swords to Plowshares does this 3 Gaia's
4
Blessing?
Swords to Plowshares, obviously.
11 fetch land decks.
Surprise to nobody. And so
because Sam's only objective in life is to cast Swords to
Plowshares. Right, yeah. So
as many times as he can.
When we announced that we were going to do this brew thing, Sam was just like, "Oh, it's time to talk through my Mox field." Which, message to the viewers: we get Sam Black on, sort of whenever it makes sense, and everyone's schedules line up. But he has an open door invitation to the podcast, and the fact of the matter is Sam plays Magic on Saturday, so it's hard for us to line up. But he has a deck in his file. He's like 5C Mirror's Guile. And when he shared it, when he mentioned that in the Facebook group, I responded with a screenshot, and I was like, this is the most optimistic spell book I've ever seen in my life, because the only cards that go up are like Mulch and Accumulated Knowledge, and he has like Mox Diamond and Miri's Guile and like a bunch of ways to go down, right? So I was like, when are you going to ever... he has like Scroll Rack, right? And he's like, okay, well, I got into this end state where you'd have your entire deck in your hand, and you'd have Scroll Rack, and you have Gaia's Blessing, and Spellbook means that you can just put your entire deck in your hand and just Scroll Rack anything you've Blessing back. And I was like, okay, that's wild. And so I started playing some games, and I'm like trying to basically feel out. And Miri's Guile was really impressive, but the thing that I don't like about Miri's Guile did come into play, which is like, I'm down a card, and my opponent just has a creature, and I've already cast 3 Swords to Plowshares, and I shuffle them back in my deck, but I'm still waiting to draw those Swords to Plowshares while my opponent... It was actually hilarious. The creature my opponent was attacking me with at the time was Hypnotic Spectre. My opponent's just attacking me with Hypnotic Spectre every turn, and my only answer to this card right now is Swords to Plowshares. Bunch of other exciting stuff going on the deck. It has Global Ruin, it has Ruination, has Overmaster to make sure those cards resolve. So that was like kind of a good example where it's just kind of like, okay, Mirror's Guile is like cool, but does the deck have a good enough card advantage engine? Does the deck have good enough answers to creatures? And then in that process, I kind of like basically experienced the same thing that I always experience when I've played every domain control deck. Shout out BK, who's taken this other player, the European player's legacy weapon deck, to the top 16 of the monthly. Whenever I play these domain control decks, like having to deal with the battlefield by only casting removal spells is super hard. Call the Herd sometimes eases that problem, but overall, it's just like a struggle to be basically playing.
What's Sam's draw engine? Enchantress still?
No. In the Guile deck, it's just in the current iteration, it's Factor Fiction, and that's it. I think just like 4 Factor Fiction.
So and he just wins by Guy's Blessing?
No, he wins. Well, he has 4 Call the Herd now. He used to have. I forget what his win con was. It was the 5 birds, ordered migration. But then he just changed it for Call the Herds, and probably for the reason that I was saying, which was just like, well, one, Call the Herd.
This is a good example of a deck that would always lose to my blue-green upheaval deck.
Yeah,
you're right. 0% win rate against my upheaval deck. By the way,
deck actually contains 4 of the counter unless you pay for domain, so the evasive action. So,
yeah, but I just have more counters than them.
Well, you start 6 mana down, right? And you don't necessarily have more because you conceivably have to contend with Global Ruin.
Oh yeah, and Guy's Blessing.
Global Ruin and Guy's Blessing, yeah.
Oh, this would be an interesting fight between 2 decks.
Between 2 completely, yeah. But anyways, I learned a lot in the process.
It's like Samurai versus Gladiator. Yeah. They're only separated by 7,000 miles and 3,000 years.
So we don't have to test the deck.
Got a big shield.
Like we don't have to test against goblins, right? We just need to test against anything. Like we just need to test against anything that's not a goldfish. Because like, if your opponent just goes like, I'm playing a deck with creatures and I'm just going to play a few creatures.
My deck against Sam's deck. I don't think you understand what has just happened.
Yeah. Well, and that's the fun of Magic. So
show me the list. I'll make this for the. I'm not even qualified for the meetup though, because there's a waiting list already.
Yeah, I think you'll get in. There are flakes.
Yeah, ship me the list. I'll see if I can make it in time.
Yeah, I mean, do you have 4 Mirror's Guile? That's like a $50 card.
Is it?
It's not like 50, but it's
offensive.
It's a lot. Yeah, it's more than it should be. But
I must have some, but I don't know.
I mean, yeah, maybe. I think it was probably a rare. It's $26 on Card Kingdom. So a playset is a big hundo. But anyways,
should I look or should I just order them from Cool Stuff because they have them in stock? They don't have a lot of current standard stuff in stock.
I don't know. I feel like you should order cards on your own time rather than the podcast time. That's just me.
I meant in general, right? I mean, I could look. I wasn't going to get off the podcast and look in my collection.
I don't even want to discuss this right now.
Okay.
We're at an hour 16. We spent 40 minutes on blue-green decks that we concluded that nobody wants to play. People want to play mine though, of course, because it's like tuned and brilliant. I will have to say mine did need more white mana sources. And I have to test it against aggressive decks. Like maybe
Plains wasn't enough for you. You don't have rampant growth.
Well, no, I mean I just had Plains, 4 Flooded Strand, 1 Skycloud Expanse, and 1 Adarkar Wastes. But I've since moved up a little bit.
You didn't have Windswept Teeth.
Oh yeah, I had Windswept Teeth too. So yeah, it came up to like I probably had like 11, and I moved it up to like 13.
I had 9 sources plus 4 rampant growth, so that's like 13 sources. That's not bad for.
Well, rampant growth to cast your Swords of Plowshares by turn 3 is not exciting if your opponent has Goblin Lackey, right?
Or you could just not have Swords of Plowshares in your deck, and you won't have to worry about this.
Yeah, that's also one way to do it. But I mentioned offhand. How exciting the black-green Roxer deck is. That one I'd be on the lookout for.
People are really into this deck, huh? I hear about it constantly.
Yeah, well, Phil just literally can't lose with it, and it won Eternal Weekend Europe, and I think that more people should be playing it. I think that it could fulfill like the sort of mid-range dream. The deck, I think that discard is like definitely pretty solid right now. If you can back it up, which this deck definitely does. You have your like one thing that you can do is play Duress, Cabal Therapy, Survival of the Fittest, and then put Sadistic Hypnotist into play. And your opposing blue deck is not going to be enjoying their life for the rest of the game. So I thought that that's kind of like a cool angle. Like I think it's one of the interesting not blue decks that play well into blue decks. I think it does decent into mono blue Dreadnought, but of course Rich Shea being Rich Shea eked out the win in the Fall Brawl, playing Raskanaut with a couple changes against Brian Lonergan, friend of the podcast, and Tolarian PTA member.
And your opponent an hour ago.
Yeah, exactly. And so that deck is super interesting. And of course, Terrageddon is super interesting. Shout out to Artie. He's been playing Junk Terrageddon with my favorite card, Vindicate. So
why do you like Vindicate? You don't like all these other kinds of cards, but like Vindicate is like the most mid card. It is like the definition of mid.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically, it just glues a deck together that is interested in like in flexibility more than anything else, because it doesn't have good card selection, right? So if you have card selection and you like Impulse, and your Impulse has Swords to Plowshares and Disenchant, and you can simply look at your opponent's battlefield and be like, do they have a creature or do they have an artifact or enchantment? And then you take the one that's good, right? Then you don't need to play Vindicate. But if your deck doesn't contain Impulse and your opponent has either a creature or an artifact enchantment, or maybe even a man land, and all you're doing is drawing your card for the turn, or maybe a Miri's Guile in play, and you're looking at the top 3 cards, right? And you need to stop
having a second Miri's Guile in that top 3, by the way, is...
Well, you're never drawing the second one because you have Miri's Guile.
I don't want this.
And eventually you'll be drawing a fetch land. I'll make a side note about this after I finish on Vindicate. So if all you're doing is drawing a card for a turn, then a lot of the time you want Vindicate to be somewhere in the mix, right? Because whenever you draw it, you're always going to be able to cast it targeting something. And that's just not the same for obvious all-star cards like Revelation or even Swords of Plowshares. Not that I would never stop playing Swords of Plowshares, but Vindicate's just like a great example of that. Like if I'm playing a deck that doesn't contain the color blue and does contain the colors black and white, like I'm looking to play Vindicate in my deck, because decks that don't create natural card advantage really, really don't want to draw Disenchant or Naturalize when your opponent doesn't have any targets.
Right now I'm thinking about if I own a second set of Llanowar Wastes, I'm like, I could make this deck, but then I have to take apart my other rock deck.
You can take apart the rock, Mike. It's not coming out of the deck box anytime soon.
Okay,
yeah.
So I have a question. I don't understand why this deck has 1 Palinchron and 1 Great Whale.
You're looking at Fran's deck. You're not looking at Phil's deck.
No, I'm looking at the deck that won Eternal Weekend.
Oh, okay. Well, the deck that won Eternal Weekend has the infinite combo, but Phil's deck doesn't have the infinite combo.
What is the infinite combo?
It's Recurring Nightmare, Great Whale, Yavimaya Granger, and that gives you infinite mana.
This deck doesn't have Yavimaya Granger.
Okay, well, I mean, even if you don't have Granger, if you have 7 lands in play, it's infinite mana.
What do I do with that? This deck could maximum draw 2 cards per turn, one of which is a squee.
I don't know. I don't know what Fran's win was once he executed the. No,
I'm being completely serious. I'm looking.
I'm completely serious.
I don't know. I don't know.
And also, this is just not the deck that I'm talking about. Like I'm just talking about Phil's like mid range deck, not the combo deck.
Okay.
But check out Fran's video if you're interested in the Palinchron combo. But yeah, the Palinchron combo forces you to run Palinchron, which if you draw is totally sucks. Which having totally sucky draws is like not exciting in your black-green deck, where if you don't draw survival, you need to like be able to play well off the top of your deck. It also has to play the 3rd Recurring Nightmare, which is always good. And I'd much rather just, if I have survival in play, like I'm probably just going to win the game anyways. It's also worth mentioning, if you want to hear more about the deck, you can check out the Duress Crew podcast episode interviewing Phil. That deck is super exciting. I was talking about Junk Terrageddon. It has Vindicate. It has Droid's Verdict if you want it. It is at least intriguing to me. I'm waiting for the Terrageddon Cabal to decide on what their deck looks like, because at this point you can play literally any color, because it has 4 Gemstone Mine, 4 Mox Diamond. And I want to know what the deck ends up looking like. But it is one deck, like if you have a Meddling Mage main, you become pretty solid against Dreadnought, and of course replenish. If you have Pyroclasm, Pyroblast in the sideboard, you can be good against creature decks. You can be whatever. Your mana can kind of support all that stuff. So I think that it's a pretty interesting deck. And like I said, I'm sort of just waiting to see what happens when all the dust settles on the metagame and somebody kind of cracks the code on like the ideal Terrageddon. Either that, or it's just going to be quote unquote customizable.
I think
to your local metagame.
Underrated.
I agree wholeheartedly.
I think this. I just don't know how this deck works. I'm looking at this Roxer deck. I mean, it just seems like a deck that would always lose to Burn to me.
It's actually solid against Burn because it has 8 walls, and then and then it can play the Baloth Recurring Nightmare endgame.
Oh, I guess Baloth Recurring Nightmare is. You need like extra resources to get that going, though. Yeah,
I mean, you go wall survival, and then you get the first Baloth, which buys you all the time that you need to like keep going, and then you're like the 8 wall deck cuts off a lot of Burn's offense. Like Burn obviously can still get you, but as long, and also you need to draw your basic lands, right? Because if you go Swampland or Waste Wall,
I guess 12 Forests is one of the things. Because against this kind of deck, I would side out all my cards that cost more than 1, and then just beat them with like darts and pops. But if they have 12 Forests, it's hard to beat them with darts and pops.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah, maybe I'll make this deck. I could definitely make this deck if I am permitted to take apart the rock, which it sounds like.
Yeah, you have.
Sounds like I have a permission.
You can dig into your box of 14 Survival of the Fittest, pull an extra 4 out, and then the rest just kind of goes in.
Those are not in a box. Those are in a binder.
Fair enough. You can go into the Survival of the Fittest binder and conscript 4 more into duty.
I also have the requisite Palancrons, Great Whales, etc. I just don't know what I'm doing with them.
Yeah, I would not use the list that contains those.
This is the champions list, Lanny. This is the deck that took down 191 other players in Prom.
Well, considering that you don't know what you're doing with it, I would suggest the one that doesn't contain those cards that you don't know what to do with.
Oh, this won't be the first time I didn't know what was in front of me.
Yeah, that's fair. Anyways, keep an eye out for that deck. The brew challenge is still on. It's probably like $80 or something. Somebody reached out and said they're going to do a Swiss tournament in Prague, and they're also going to do a Brewer's Prize there. I encourage such behavior, of course. I think it's also funny because it's metagame warping. Like, if you go to a tournament with a Brewer's Prize or a lot of Spike Colony listeners, you might just want to play Burn, and then... But...
Wait, would this cutthroat solution count? It's just a solution with one zombie cutthroat.
I think if blue white flippy with zombie cutthroat is the only deck that wins a tournament in the month, I'll give them the $80. But if anything slightly spicier than that wins, obviously the next thing would get it.
But I kind of love this because it does give you like some question marks around when they play a morph.
Yeah, that's what it's designed for. It's literally designed for your opponent just being like, "Oh, you're tapped out. I'll bolt that."
Yeah, but
and they're like, "Haha, I will take 5 damage."
Idiot
to reveal. Or they'll attack their Call the Herd into it, right? So you go turn 3 morph, they'll go like, "Ha, I attack you with my elephant," and then you go like double zombie cut through.
Oh man, I'm in love with zombie cutthroat as the solution now.
Yeah, it's something. I think 5 life is a lot. Like, it's a hell of a lot.
Let's say if you made them discard a lightning bolt to do it, you only net lost 2 life, and then it was like a reverse searing. People can't see the face that I just made.
Yeah. I'm still trying to like count, Lava Axe costs 5 mana and you just like let them do it for 1.
Yeah, but
I'm like so my next play is...
This could go a lot of ways, man.
I feel like it kind of goes one way. I feel like what happens afterwards is I sacrifice 2 mountains and I ask you how much you're at. I feel like that's how that goes.
Yeah, they've been tapping their fingers the whole time.
Yeah. Like as soon as they flip the zombie cutthroat, they're just like, interesting.
They're brailing out with their hand.
Yeah, they're just like, I think I can count to 20 now. Like I couldn't before.
You only have to count to 15, man.
Yeah. But yeah, that's super sick. I don't know, Mike. I think you should brew a deck.
I do love this.
I think for Tuesday,
this.
you should brew a deck though. You should build a completely unique deck so that you can start testing.
I would just play my Nimble Mongoose deck, but you have my Nimble Mongooses.
Just proxy or borrow the Nimble Mongoose.
All right. Say something smart, and then let's go because I have to go to Andy's party.
Thank you for playing Pre-Modern. It was a great year. Thank you for listening to Spike Colony all throughout 2024. I found out, it has been brought to my attention that the longer episodes have more plays because people listen halfway through and then they stop and then they listen the rest of the half later.
That's what I said from the beginning.
So they're doubling their stuff. So it actually doesn't matter what length because our audience is the same.
That's literally what I said.
We love you, our audience. Yep. Check out the YouTube. 2 new videos. We didn't even get to talk about my run with Sam's Enchantress deck, which I guess, I don't know. Sam's Enchantress deck is playable. It didn't like blow me away, but it is effectively, to me, it's like a high performing brew, and it has a lot of reasons why it's good. It's definitely a contender. I'd like to see more people play it. It's also very well tuned, I will say. Like, I played 6 matches with the deck. I used all of my sideboard cards, and like it had like this feel of just like this deck is complete, except for like maybe like one card, being like the Karmic Justice or Words of War or whatever. But other than that, it's just like very well tuned and kind of a sick deck.
I just had a thought. I could play Zombie Cutthroat in like any white deck, and like I could gotcha them with the Zombie Cutthroat. And then I thought the absolute next thought was, or that could have just been an Exalted Angel, right?
Well, you already have 4.
So
you already have 4, right? And you know what's a good combo with lose 5 life? Is gain
Exalted
4
Angel.
life. Yeah.
Exalted Angel. Yeah. Okay.
So you open up your hand and it's turn 3, and you've got Exalted Angel and you've got Zombie Cutthroat.
What if we play Green White Little Kid? So I have Birds Elves turn 1. Play second turn.
We didn't even talk about. Okay, sorry to cut you off. We didn't even talk about the Solan Stompy deck that top 8'd at the same tournament.
That was our idea from.
I know that was our idea. I had a deck in my file. It was like little kid green. It was called Little Kid Green White. I was like, I'm gonna go Solan, Mox Diamond, Exile Elvish Spirit Guide, Blastoderm. And some sicko actually did it.
This was literally our deck.
I'm not taking credit for. I'm not gonna be that guy who's gonna be like, I came up with it first. Obviously, I was actually very excited to see it, and my deck was green white. And I had like Call the Herd. I thought there was some really interesting stuff going on. It had Tangle Wire, so it kind of had like the problem with my
next time to devote actual time to it.
Yeah,
I don't have to leave because I'm already late.
All right. We love you. Get brewing. Go win a tournament. Pre-modern is excellent. 10 out of 10 format. Love Spike.
Game over.